Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Yes, I am about to head to the hospital. It is 10:06. I'm scheduled to be there at 11 for surgery. So yes, I'd appreciate your prayers. I go into surgery. This will be the 16th. So probably by the time you watch this, I've been out of surgeries. But your prayers for healing would be appreciated. The topic today is trouble has arrived. Now, I wasn't even going to make a program, but with the things I just ran across, I can't wait. I got to put this up. First headline, SNAP and EBT programs to be paused starting November. You see, Hal Turner does a real good job of coming up with the great information we need for the Prophecy Club. But not being a prophecy student, he doesn't understand what he's saying. Now, let me ask you, do you understand what that's saying? Do you see where that's going? Let me read it again. SNAP and EBT programs to be paused starting November 1. Does that mean anything to you? That's huge. That's big. That's in the process of fulfilling a prophecy we got back in 2010. Now, let's go on, see if you can figure it out. So the article says U.S. Department of Agriculture is instructing the states to pause SNAP and EBT payments beginning November 1. And he says, I expect riots to begin nationwide on that same day or shortly after, just like we've been saying. The letter points out that this is related to the ongoing government shutdown caused by Democrats refusing to approve a continuing resolution to continue funding government operations. And so it goes on. Now, here, let me point out. I have been saying, based upon the prophecy, it's not me, God didn't speak to me about this, but he spoke to his other servants, and I bring that information to you. So what I think is about to happen, I am not convinced we're even going to come out of this shutdown. It may be that the Democrats just keep it shut down until finally Trump says, okay, let's just go to a whole new constitution, a new flag, a new name, and a new currency system. And just let the Democrats fall by the wayside, which, of course, then the massive arrests start. That brings on the internal revolution. Now, I got some other really important information for you today. I got to get to it. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, provides food to some 42 million Americans. Do you remember Shane Warren saying that he saw people holding up their signs saying, give us our entitlements? What is an entitlement? That is an entitlement, a SNAP. In other words, what Shane was shown in 2010, and I've been blasting out ever since then, which, by the way, you can go watch the video at watchprophecyclub.com. I encourage you to go watch it. Go watch him. Look into his eyes as he's telling you this. Watchprophecyclub.com. Just type in Shane Warren, and it'll pop right up. Anyway, next one. This is tying into a decision to nuke-strike the United States has been made in Russia. What? Well, we were told this. We were warned this back in 1984, and few people would listen to Dmitry Duduman, and even fewer people listened to Stan Johnson. But here it is. Now, I've downloaded the video. This guy's playing this. Now, here's what I want to do. I'm going to read what he says. Then we're going to show you the video so you can see it. In other words, this is a Russian in a public setting saying that we should nuke the United States. Watch. Just what he says. So when rays of light from our country, what are rays of light? That would be nuclear, because when a nuclear blast goes off, it sends out rays of light that blind you if you happen to be looking in that direction, and it sends them out in all directions. When rays of light from our country reach them, talking about the United States, this is the euphemism used by the Speaker of the Russian State Duma. Okay, this is one of the top government officials in Russia saying this. This is no schmuck. To dismiss nuclear attack by Russia against the continental United States, France, and Germany. Yakoslav Volodin, if I'm saying that right, who cares if I'm not, on Wednesday, called former U.S. President Joe Biden, French President Emmanuel Macron, and former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz mold. He then explicitly said, and there will be fewer people like Biden in the world, fewer like Macron or Scholz, because they're mold. See, like Hitler, attacked the Jews and made them worthless. They're less than human, and that's what the devil does before he starts killing in mass. It will wither away when the rays of light from a country reach them. Colleagues, this is exactly how we should think. Here's the video of him saying it.
В мире будет меньше таких, как Байден, меньше будет таких, как Макрон, Мерц, потому что это плесень. Она будет гибнуть, когда лучи света нашей страны их достигнут. Коллеги, именно так мы должны рассуждать.
So, now Russia is preparing, as if they hadn't been preparing for 60 years, preparing to attack America. They're getting their people ready to do that. On to the next one. Liquidity crisis in financial markets as reverse repo empties. Okay, so, well, why would they have to stop the snap? Why would they have to take away the entitlements? Well, because there's a government shutdown. Well, that's the Democrats. Democrats can come in any minute now and vote to reverse that. But this is not so easy to correct. And so for me to get this across, I got to spend most of the time reading every word of this, and I encourage you to stay with me because you want to know about a financial crash coming? Here it is. Liquidity crisis in financial markets as reverse repo empties. What? A reverse repo? Most people never heard about the Federal Reserve Reverse Repurchase Agreement Facility, or RRP, and yet it's one of the most important signals in modern financial markets. In fact, it has quietly become the pressure gauge of systemic liquidity, the barometer of money market fragility, and when read correctly, a whispering alarm bell that goes off just before chaos becomes visible everywhere. Do you remember me reading the vision from You Be Ready? Talk about how the show had begun? Well, the show has begun. At its core, the RRP is a simple plumbing tool. It allows the Fed to borrow cash overnight from financial institutions, like money market funds, government-sponsored enterprises, and banks by offering them Treasury securities as collateral and paying them a small rate of return. Think of it as a Fed mopping up excess cash in the system to help maintain control of short-term interest rates. The rate it offers on RRP sets a floor under the federal funds rate and the SOFR, preventing those rates from crashing when the system is flush with the reserves. I know, you're kind of like me. Your eyes start crossing about right now, but try to stay with me. This is really important. In ordinary times, RRP helps with stability. But in ordinary times, its usage tells a very different story. That's what we're interested in. So when RRP usage declines, it means that cash is leaving the Fed's vaults and going elsewhere, often into T-bills, repo markets, or back into the banking system. Now, at first glance, that seems benign, even healthy. But when RRP draws down too far, and it has, especially under conditions of aggressive Treasury issuance and ongoing quantitative tightening, the story changes. RRP is a buffer, a shock absorber. When that buffer gets depleted and bank reserves at the Fed start falling, the system starts feeding on itself, snake eating its tail, okay? There's no longer an easy outlet for cash to move safely, so that's when stress shows up suddenly and violently, and guess what? It's happening. It's already started. This was the story of 2019 before the pandemic. The Fed was shrinking the balance sheet and reserves fell too far. The result? The overnight repo rate spiked to 10% in September 2019, completely blowing past Fed's target. Now, I remember seeing a lot of cars being repossessed. I would go play racquetball, and in the parking lot of the racquetball place was a bank. And before long, we were finding it difficult to find a place to park because the parking lot was full of repossessed cars that the bank was repossessing. That is about to happen again, only on a big scale. Emergency repos were deployed and quantitative tightening was paused. But the warning signs were there for months in money market behavior. The problem was no one was watching the plumbing. Stay with me. In 2025, we are in a similar place, but with higher rates, a much larger treasury market, and a much more fragile global system. The RRP facility is now under $300 billion. Hang on. A shadow of its former self. That buffer is almost gone. Once it hits zero, listen carefully, stay with me. Once it hits zero, any further funding needs, whether from T-bills, corporate cash draws, or foreign divestment, must come from bank reserves or risk assets. That's where the cracks begin to show. Do you remember Brandon Biggs? This is the guy that saw Trump shot the right ear 3 months before it happened. Do you remember him saying that he saw that all of a sudden the banks closed, the ATMs were shut down, and they took all of the money from the savings and the checking accounts from everybody in the nation? They took all of that money in order to make the bank solvent. Repo rates spike. 10 T-bills auctions falter, credit spreads widen, and the Fed either panics or pivots. Now, I can't tell you to buy gold and silver. Matter of fact, it may be too late. But you need to be praying about it. So, while most eyes are on CPI prints or the next FOMC meeting, the smart money watches the RRP because when it empties out, history tells us, here it is, the countdown to crisis has already, look at that word, already begun. With usage near zero, RRPs can no longer provide meaningful liquidity to the financial markets. In other words, we have a shutdown in our government. You just saw the letter that the government sent out saying, snap, all of these governments hand out the welfare is going to be cut off November 1. Okay? In the coming chart, you can see that not only is there no cash going into the Federal Reserve repo, the exact opposite has taken place. Banks have given the Federal Reserve treasuries the banks own to get Fed loans against those treasuries. The banks are now seeking operating cash from the Fed. In other words, the banks are upside down. The banks are out of money. And where do you suppose they're going to get the money? Okay, so the banks are trying to go to the Fed for the money. What happens when the Fed doesn't give it to them? The banks take your money and my money. Isn't that what the prophecy said? See, sometimes the prophets know more than the bankers. Let's go on. Here is the chart he's talking about. Now, what I want you to look at is not the green on the top, but it's the box in the bottom right corner that is actually zoomed in, and the bottom part of that in the bottom right corner is what you need to look at. In other words, it's saying that we're already upside down. In other words, it's not just the shutdown. Why do you think the Democrats have come up with a ridiculous offer saying the only way we're going to vote for this next budget is if you give us some, what is it, $2 billion or $2 trillion or some crazy amount? Because they know the system is about to crash and there's no way to hold it up. It's like a bomb has been dropped from the airplane and it's on the way down. It just hasn't hit yet, but it's in air and nothing can stop it. Let's go on. So today's reverse repo auction at the Federal Reserve set off this alarm bell. Banks have no excess cash. Look at that again. Banks have no excess cash to park at the Fed. Instead, they need cash from the Fed. Where are they going to get it? Fed going to give it to them? What happens if the Fed doesn't? Then they get it from you and me, taking it out of our checking and savings accounts. Boom, just like the prophet said. This is the beginning of a liquidity crisis. Do you remember what You Be Ready said? The show has begun. Think 2008 great financial crisis. Only 4 times worse. Back in 2008, banks held securities that had unrealized losses, totaling about $100 billion. Today, those banks are holding securities that have unrealized losses of now $398 billion, not $100 billion. 4 times worse. Here, look. Now, if you'll take a look at this, and I know, you're probably about to have your eyes cross again. But what I want you to look at is the 2005 area out to the far right. So this is showing losses. If you look, We've been in the red. We've been in the loss column since 2022. But something has been propping it up. Look, wait a minute. Do you remember Shane Warren said that he was told the thing that would crash the dollar is when they started selling oil in another currency other than the dollar, which started June 9th, 2024. And we've all been shocked about why the dollar has not already crashed. And you remember Dana Coverstone saw that the dollar goes down one third to zero. Shane saw down 50%, then to zero. Okay, so we're talking about several. Chris Reed saw the same thing. We can spend another hour going through things we've already talked about, or you could just believe what I'm selling you in summary here. Okay, let's go on. Just about out here. Many of you may recall that the last time something like this happened, banks cut credit card and credit limits, even on the best customers, cut down or halted business lines of credit, and ATMs stopped spitting out cash. Let me read that again. You may recall the last time that happened, cut credit card limits, even on the best customers, cut down or halted business lines of credit, and ATMs stopped spitting out cash. Isn't that what Brandon said he saw? He saw that the banks just took everything in the account. Everything. Do yourselves a favor, he says. Get some cash from the bank. He says tonight, I can't give you financial advice. But he says tonight to live on, not to pay bills, cash for food, fuel, and medicines. If credit cards suddenly stop working, cash will be king. That's the reason I'm going to send you to 800-200-GOLD. 800-200-GOLD, 800-200-GOLD, especially if you have an IRA, 401k. Look, if you have a large amount of money and it's not gold or silver, if it's in some kind of a paper something, maybe it's even a bank, you owe it to yourself to call these guys and say, look, here's my situation. Now, my situation is I'm going to end this early today because I'm heading to the hospital. Appreciate your prayers. Appreciate your prayers. God bless you. If you don't want to lose your life's savings, if you have an IRA or a 401k, the thing to do is call 800-200-GOLD. 800-200-GOLD. These folks are Christians and they specialize in helping people not lose their life savings in the event of a stock market crash and things like that. Look, most of the 401ks, most of the IRAs are in paper, backed by paper. And as Lindsey Williams says, if it's in paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. You can lose it all. 1-800-200-GOLD. 800-200-GOLD. Hey, give them a call. Doesn't hurt. Doesn't cost you anything. See if they can give you some good advice. When the suitcase nukes, I didn't say if, I said when the suitcase nukes go off, if you want your car to start, if you want your computers and your refrigerators and things like that, anything with a computer chip to work, you want to have one of these from EMPShield.com. EMPShield.com. And they have videos up there. It takes about 10 minutes to put on. It's not complicated at all. And if you use the word prophecy, promo code prophecy, you get a $50 discount and it helps your Prophecy Club. Okay, the very best offer we have ever had of the Prophecy Club is 40 books for a gift of $100. That is How Pre-Trib Won, Tribulation Secrets in Daniel, God's Warnings to America, Miss the Mark, and The Secret Door to Understand Bible Prophecy. I'll explain. As I've said many times in 2017, I memorized the book of Revelation. I got 30 revelations, 2 visions, and an audible voice. God showed me a secret door, the word first fruits, which is found in Leviticus and also Revelation, that links the feasts to the prophecies of Revelation. And perhaps for the first time, Revelation can be understood. One prophetic word said, there's a lock. I put over a word in the book of Revelation. I'm going to open it to you. It will turn many books written on the end-time message into obsolete books. That's this book. Secondly, I put together a collection of the very best prophecies from 32 years in Bible prophecy. Dimitri Duduman, Michael Boldale, Leslie Johnson, Henry Gruver, Shane Warren, Terry Bennett, Maurice Sklar, Augusto Perez, Doug Metzger, Bree Keaton, and more in God's Warnings to America. Also, How do you talk to people about the mark of the beast, especially if they worship another god? Well, simple way is give them this book. It's a quick read, takes about 3 hours to read it, but if they'll read 2 or 3 pages, they'll probably read the book, and if they read the book, they will never take the mark of the beast. It explains both the mark of the beast and also the number of the name, and it has these pictures in the book. Finally, how pre-trib won. This book explains the truth about the rapture. It gives 4 foundations for the real truth about the rapture. It also answers 25 pre-trib questions, 1 for $20, each one of these typically, but don't do that. We offer them in shrink-wrap sets. The very best deal is go to prophecyclub.com and get the entire 40-book set for $100. I didn't cover every verse in the book of Daniel, didn't need to. I just covered the verses that has to do with us end-time saints. And it's called Tribulation Secrets in Daniel, 1 for $20, 10 for $30, 20 for $50 at prophecyclub.com.